Welcome to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast, where we are always on the level. We're your hosts. I'm Brother Samuel.
I'm Brother Gabriel.
And I'm Brother Ryan.
And we're just a bunch of Masons trying to find our place in this fraternity. Craftsmen, thank you for joining us again on this awesome episode where we have plans to have a little debate about Brother George Washington and Brother Benjamin Franklin. For those of you that have been following us in our most recent episodes, we took a couple deep dives into these icons of Masonry, and it's time to talk about what we've learned about this and maybe argue who our favorite one of the two is in this case. Kind of a epic icons of history battle here. But first, some very exciting news. Brother Ryan, would you like to take over for that?
Of course. So, in recent days, we've been in communication with our friends at Mason Gear and talking to him about getting our personalized logo on some merch. And we are happy to announce that we have finally officially have merch. We currently only have 3 items, but they're still amazing. We have a nice hat, we have a t-shirt, and a hoodie. You can go to masongear.com to find them, or if you go to Genoa Lodge 433 website and then click on the tab for our podcast and then scroll down a little bit, you'll see a link to the actual merch. And I've already bought something the day it went live, or the hour it went live that Sam told me, hey, it's live. I went on, got a t-shirt. Haven't gotten it yet just because it just went live yesterday.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but super looking forward to it. Once my merch comes in, I'm sure we'll be doing an unboxing. I know you guys were also talking about buying some merch, so maybe we make that into a nice little short video.
Yeah, that's the plan. Also, there's multiple colors for everything.
Yes.
But here's the most important thing, Craftsman. Our portion of the proceeds from everything that we get from selling this merchandise, it's all going to be donated to the Genoa Lodge Grand Officers Fund. We are not taking a penny of the money.
Yep.
Everything goes to support our lodge. So
yep.
Everything you buy helps our lodge.
Because we could not do this without the support of our lodge. And this is our way of giving back to our lodge, is that we're not, even if we had 1 million subscribers, we're not in this for the money. We're in this for the benefit of Masonry.
Amen, brother. So on to other news, fun news. So those of you that have watched our most recent episode with Brother Benjamin Franklin, we have received a lot of outreach about this episode. Mm-hmm. I've gotten comments all over the board, people talking about this episode, but we've gotten some very interesting communications as well. So we have a longtime fan. His last name is Purdy. I'm not going to give his full name because I don't want to, dox him. I don't want to dox him.
Oh, okay.
He reached out and let us know that he enjoyed our episode greatly. But he also had some thoughts. So I'm just going to read the message that he sent us, and I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Looking forward to hearing it.
It said, brothers, I just finished listening to your episode on Benjamin Franklin. Wanted to give you a couple of things. Yes, Lafayette was indeed a Mason. There's recently a book written about him coming back to America tour written by a brother Mason. I personally have said purchase this book since then. I'm looking forward to that. He is also the only person to be buried in American soil in a foreign country. The United States government actually sent over American soil to France so that way Lafayette could be buried in the American soil after all the work he had done to help us. Ben Franklin was also the Grand Master for Pennsylvania, yet is buried without Masonic honors because when he died, he was considered an irregular Mason because of his connection to French Masonry. French Masonry is not considered regular in many current jurisdictions, but especially at that time. The biggest reason is because French Masonry does not require the belief in a supreme being. Now, this is obviously his message, but I have conversed with this brother before, and he's very well educated. You could go debating back and forth, but that does kind of track with me that the reason why Ben is not considered Mason Supreme is probably because he was considered an irregular Mason in his time.
And now in the current day, we have a much better standing with French Masonry.
I believe so.
As far as I understand.
At least here in Ohio, I think.
Yeah, and
I haven't dug too deep into that because, we're still learning about how all this goes too.
absolutely. And that's something very interesting to consider, though, is that he was kind of considered potentially kind of an outcast, or not really a traitor or anything, but almost some people probably at the time considered him to be associating with clandestine organizations and the like, so they probably got their jimmies in a feather.
Well, think about this, though, too. Our charters all come from the Grand Lodge of England.
Yeah. So
I mean,
England and France being historic enemies.
it was probably already a tough sell for Masonry in the United States after the war because, we just got done fighting a war with England, so who actually signs all of our charters? So that's an interesting question. So I thought that was really cool. Thank you, Brother Purdy. We always appreciate you reaching out. He's always got great thoughts about our episodes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
thank
we'll
you.
have him on some.
Yeah, that would actually be really cool.
That'd be really cool.
Part 2. This is the one that really blew my mind. Give me a second. I got to go through my phone real quick, and I got to find his email. So unfortunately, this one I'm going to absolutely butcher. This was sent to us via email. Dear Brother Samuel, Gabriel, and Ryan, I have listened to your latest Third Degree Masonic podcast episode on Brother Ben Franklin earlier today. Super enriching. Many thanks for the investigations. Lafayette was indeed a Mason. He sent me multiple sources that prove the point. The French baguette. Yes, we use bread, not only baguette, during banquets following our lodge work for some rites, but it's also considered the rough ashlar in Masonry as bread. This is from you talking about their gavels being baguettes, by the way.
Oh, well.
How do we practice Masonry in France? One must live it. Feel free to reach out and pay us a few visits. Generally, your guest is correct in the same aim, slightly different wrap-up for him. From my perspective, it's interesting to mention that in the past 17th, 18th centuries, most France developed mystic upper degrees beyond the Blue Lodge, having to do with, Ben Franklin being at some of these mystic degrees. So, looking forward to your next episode on Washington versus Franklin. He's originally Czech, and he's living in France for more than half his life by now. So he's a active French Mason.
I think
Grand
that's
Lodge
kind
of the Nation of
Northern France probably is what that
could
is.
be. But
it's wonderful to have correspondence like that.
yeah, absolutely.
They're 6 hours ahead of us. I was just trying to think of if there is a way we could somehow get that phone call set up to talk to him.
I mean, we could.
We would just have to do it. Yeah,
We could-
early
We
in
could
our day.
travel. We could take the podcast across the pond.
You pay that plane bill, and I'll go along.
We'll ask the lodge.
Oh yeah, okay.
We'll just leave the check on the secretary's desk. What's he gonna do? Say no?
Secretary's gonna go no, and throw it away. And
So-
not even bring it up in meeting.
So anyways, Craftsman, needless to say, we had a great time with the Ben Franklin episode. So now it's time to sit down and we're going to figure out what we've learned about both of them. So when we talked about our most recent one with Ben Franklin, we learned that he was a entrepreneur, a shrewd businessman, but also very philanthropic, an inventor. He was a rock star over in France with, how popular he was with what he did. And he also created a lot of the, your volunteer fire department, your volunteer police force, your libraries. He kind of was one of the originators of that. As far as a Mason, and you'll find this interesting, Ryan, he was a Mason for about 3 to 5 years, and then he was made Grand Master of Masons. So think about that.
Jesus.
I know you weren't here when we recorded that, so.
No. That's definitely lightning bolt material right
Correct.
there. It's hey, I just got my feet wet. What? I'm running the whole thing? Okay, this is great.
This is great. He also brought the first Masonic communications from
He brought Grandview? Holy shit. It's that old. Wow.
Yeah, right. Feels like it sometimes.
Yeah.
Man, are we going to get emails about that?
I don't care. But Anderson's Book of Communication, Anderson's Book of Constitutions, I'm sorry. That was the first, Masons follow on this. This is our, this is so all Masons are doing something uniform. We don't use Anderson's in Ohio. Gotcha. Some jurisdictions might. I don't know. We do not. It might even be considered like non-grata reading material. I'm not sure. There's a couple of books. I didn't know this. There's a couple of books in Masonry that you're just like not supposed to ignore. Like there was a time where you could get in trouble just owning them.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to watch out for those.
Yeah. Most of them are from like,
those.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't know whether it's because they're clandestine or because technically it breaks one of the tenets of Masonry of not, revealing the secrets.
Gotcha.
Because it's written down. So, don't know. Not that important. But what is important is talking about the fact that this man lived such an interesting life. And then when he died, his tombstone is literally just a small placard that reads, "Here lies Ben Franklin, food for worms."
It's
printer.
There's a lot more than that.
Yeah, there's a lot more than that. It's very elegantly put, but
yeah,
it's very, very simple,
sweet, and to the point.
Yeah,
yep.
And versus Brother George Washington, who was didn't start off as the best military person, and actually started off really, really not from any means whatsoever. His family was rich, but his side of the family was not, and it was only by happenstance that he inherited everything.
Gotcha.
And then he kind of self-taught himself, joined lodge, and went through his whole way. He's only been recorded at being at a few Masonic meetings in his entire life. Officially.
Officially, but there's anecdotal evidence
Correct.
of him being at other Masonic functions and stuff of that nature.
Correct. So, in comparison here, we have a guy who was 100% Ben Franklin, jumped into Masonry, became Grand Master, did all of this stuff, was a very active Mason, versus Brother Washington, who his Mount Vernon is like 100 or 50 miles from his lodge, which back then would not be a lot of traveling. So he didn't go to lodge very often, but he did go to military lodge functions, probably.
Yep.
All anecdotal, but not super active. Was the master of his lodge for a hot second while they were doing some, probably ceremoniously. I'm not sure, but I'm just guesstimating here. But he did ensure that the cornerstone was laid for Washington, D.C. In Masonic fashion. So obviously the craft was really important to him, but how active he was in his lodge, back and forth. So, I start this question off to Gabe. What are your thoughts?
So, I love Ben Franklin. I love his story. I think he gets a lot more grief than he deserves. I think that he is an astounding Freemason, an astounding American citizen. But I think I understand why George Washington is the face of our organization. For me, it does kind of come down to how Washington handled himself, what Washington did, and the kind of way he conducts himself, just overall, as a Mason, as a general, as a leader of men, as a president, and as a citizen. And also, there's such different universes that the two are operating in at the time, at just alone the time of the Revolution. A soldier and a diplomat are two very different people because they have to be. And there is something to be said and something that's valued in my mind of what Washington did, what Washington went through, what Washington experienced, forging in fire the groundwork for our country, fighting for the future of this country with steel, blood, and sweat. And then also the intense negotiation of Ben Franklin, his probably constant elbow rubbing and favor calling and negotiating and long hours into the night writing letters, probably sleepless nights, if not sleepless weeks.
Well, and I do have to update something here because I did find something out after the episode came out. So Ben Franklin was about 70 years old when the revolution started. So that would be a lot. That'd be like asking your grandfather to go over to France and be a diplomat. And him going, "You want me to do what?"
That's completely... Go ahead, Ryan.
Not even just that. Think about back in the day where going across the pond wasn't a day travel.
Yeah.
It was a 3-week minimum trip.
If you have good weather and you have a fast boat. Like, that's, so it's like asking your grandpa to go to China and go find this one merchant and go talk to them for 30 minutes.
It's a quest.
Yeah.
There is something to be said, though. I mean, we live in times of privilege that our ancestors could have never understood, but Ben Franklin did get to go to basically a hotel bed every night and live in a clean, relatively clean city, Paris at the time, and have access to taverns and meals and amenities and social events versus Washington, who is constantly covered in the grime and sweat and gunpowder of battle, maybe getting a couple hours of sleep in his dirty tent that then has to be torn down and moved with the rest of the camp. And then let alone the experiences of Valley Forge and other horrendous campaigns. So yes, Ben Franklin gets to have those privileges and amenities because A, he's older and that's expected. And B, he has status and he has recognition and he has privilege. So he's there in that world. And Washington's in this other world at the time, fighting that hardcore battle. I mean, I am not a full-time soldier. I don't want to toot my own horn. There are so many more men who are better than me, so many better soldiers that live their army values as full-time soldiers that do the hard work for this country. And in my mind, Washington gets put in that category in my mind of he's the man who does the hard work for this country.
Right. Well, and I would throw this on the other side too. I know you really appreciate the military side of things because that's where your stock comes from. But also there is something to be said about, Washington was always surrounded by his troops. Nobody's walking into the tent and slitting Washington's throat in the middle of the night. Ben Franklin's over in France alone, an old man, meeting with a government. By the way, we're not a country. We're not afforded any protections. Yep. This is a long time before we agreed about diplomatic status. So at any point in time, somebody could have shivved Franklin on the street and he would have just died like a dog in the street. That's not happening to Washington. And at any point in time, the French could have said, we don't really like the way that you're trying to get us to conspire against another country. We're just going to throw you in jail too.
Fair enough, but your head could also be taken off by a cannonball, a stray cannonball, or you could be captured. I agree.
I'm not disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is you can't, it's not the safest thing in the world either. We asked a 70-year-old man to go to another country where luckily he's got rock star status, because if somebody else would have went, no one would have cared. and probably would have gotten killed, you know. They would have sent assassins, I would imagine. Wouldn't have been a problem. If he wasn't so far ingrained in the society, he would have been a way bigger target. Would have just been easier to kill the old man and leave him.
Well,
So-
again, because simply by the fact that he had the celebrity status, he was going to receive protection. He was going to receive accommodation. He was going to be looked after.
Maybe.
I mean, he had an entourage. He had groups of people with him. He had maybe not like servants, but he had basically the equivalent of butlers over there and everything.
All right. But
So,
let's not downplay the fact that we asked a 70-year-old man to take
especially
the
at the
chance
time. Yeah.
and to get murdered. You know, hey, there's a good chance we're all going to die at the end of this anyway, but like, you know, but I digress.
Yeah.
But Masonically. Let's move into
Yes.
Masonically. Because I think that's what the listeners really care about.
Yes. So here is my issue with Ben Franklin.
Okay.
Masons are not called to be docile. Masons are not called to be simply sitting by. Like, I appreciate Ben Franklin's willingness to A, voice his opinion, B, do what he thinks is right, and C, like, have confidence in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And confidence in carrying himself, and confidence in how he conducts himself and does his business. My problem is that he like skirts that line almost a little bit too close for me, just for my personal taste, is because when I think of who should be a political leader or a Masonic leader, I think of someone who should be very well spoken and very well controlled at all times, and that they have tact to be able to voice their opinion without being outwardly like for instance, I know when you're going to voice an opinion in lodge and you say it in certain ways that are very, like, you're really trying to drive your point home.
Why use many words when few words will do?
True. I'm not trying to advocate for word salading everything.
Right.
But I believe that especially when you are sitting in the East,
Yes.
you have to have the responsibility of that you are also the caretaker for the opinions of everyone in the lodge.
Yes.
Not just your own opinions about how it should work.
Okay.
So my thing with that is that I see Washington as much more aligned with my idea of that, because he was very, from the evidence I have read, from the sources I have read, he was very tactful in his negotiation with fellow politicians. He was very tactful in his statements and negotiations with people of other religions. He was very tactful and well-mannered in discussions with other nations' leaders, other businessmen of that type. So
Sure.
in my mind, it's almost like George Washington is the president, the CEO, the general, the commander, and Ben Franklin is the enforcer or propagandist or like news commentator or like celebrity of Masonry, like someone who's going to ambassador, a traveling ambassador almost.
Okay.
And hence, as he was at the time. But the thing, why I think it's better because it's really close for me, like, because especially everything that you have enlightened me on with Ben Franklin, it's so close in my mind. But if I had to choose, I would choose Washington, purely because of how he acts as a leader. And that's my other thing, is that Ben, I don't think Ben was out for himself. I think Ben was very altruistic and very devoted to his fellow man and his fellow citizenry. I haven't really seen a lot of examples of him being like a mass leader, so I don't know how he would act as a governor or a politician or a military leader. And that's why I have to, if I was forced to draw the line somewhere, I would draw it on Washington, even though it would be very close.
So one thing, and I've been kind of Googling a little bit while you're talking and listening to you. So as Sam said, like he was the, it's not ambassador, but it's a different word, for France for when we were doing the Revolutionary War and stuff. The Constitution was written in 1787. The first president was 1788. Ben Franklin was 82 years old. So that is a huge factor. And actually, if you Google why didn't Ben Franklin become a president, old age and death, he was riddled with so many health concerns. That's where he was like, I'm not running.
And he didn't want to. He really didn't really particularly want to be a part of the convention. But they were pretty much, people were like, if you're not here, I'm not coming.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, I guess I will answer the call. But this gets on to my point, okay? And I'm going to break it down very simply for you. What is a Mason, right? Let's break it down into some simple pieces here. We got a good man striving to be better. And what is expected of a Mason when they join? It's expected that when another Mason calls, you'll answer, right? I mean, I'm putting this into the simple terms so we're not breaking any rules here. And you will do the best you can for the fraternity and to stay within those due bounds and try and be a good man and learn the lessons of Masonry to make your life and your world better, right? I mean, there's a whole chunk about charity and, faith, hope, and charity, right? So, Ben, I'm going to start with the charity part because I think that's the biggest one. Ben walked into this world and went, how can I make the world better, right? He joined Masonry and said, I really like this, what these guys are so about, that not only am I going to do good things for them, but I'm going to do good things as a Mason and as a citizen, and it's going to benefit everyone as a whole. Doesn't benefit him, benefits the whole. On top of all of that, on top of doing all of this charity, he becomes active not only in Masonry on our continent, but also a whole nother continent, and uses those connections and those brotherhoods to help us going forward. Yeah, does he have his flaws? Absolutely. But show me a Mason who's not improving himself, because he always aimed to improve himself. That's what a Mason is supposed to do. A Mason's not perfect coming out the gate. I'm sure George Washington improved himself, but the fact that I can't find any flaws about him tells me that he probably was pretty good through and through all the way through. His errors were not in his moral compass. His errors were probably more didn't know what he didn't know, right? With Ben, I think Ben knew his flaws and knew he had to improve his flaws. And the fact that he made mistakes, he misstepped a couple of times. And instead of allowing those missteps to go, well, screw it, I'm going to get on opium and do, opium like a fiend, he picked himself back up and said, you know what, tomorrow's another day. Let me work on another virtue. Let me try and fix things, right? So to me, that's what makes a good Mason. Ben's constantly improving himself. He's trying to do better. But not only that, but Ben's taking Masonry from his lodge room, Tun Tavern, and taking it out into the community and saying, not going, hey world, look at Ben Franklin. I'm better than you. He's going out there and going, yeah, we need this. Let's do this thing. hey, I'm going to drag Masonry there with me because he had to use his Masonic contacts to make some things happen. But ultimately, going back to every time that Ben was ever asked and said, Ben, we need you to do this, he answered the call. Your country needs you, your lodge needs you, your fraternity needs you, your fellow statesmen need you. Because I'm telling you, if you called me up at 70 years old and said, I need you to go with me to the other end of the world, and there's a good chance you're going to get your head lobbed off, I'm probably going to look at you and go, are we going to have snacks?
Now, I will...
But my argument is at the end of the day, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I think Ben is a perfect example of what a Mason should be. I think a Mason should not just be stoic and stock and strong and smart. I think we need to take those virtues that we learn here in this lodge, and they need to go outside, because we used to worry about improving society. Now we're worried about what's happening in this lodge room and what happens in the fraternity. Now we need to take this stuff and we need to go back outside and we need to figure out how we implement it into our communities to make our communities better. That's my argument.
And I see your point. To kind of...
Devil's advocate,
kind of defend what Brother Franklin did versus Brother Washington. When the Revolutionary War was happening, Ben was 70 years old, like you said. George was 43, I think, 40.
That sounds about right.
Way different. Gabe, you're a military person. Do you want Grandpa fighting on the front war, or do you want someone your age fighting on the front line?
Well, at the time, you'd probably want the 15-year-old, but... Yeah,
so that's where I think, like, I see what both sides are and what we're kind of talking about, but to me, I'm almost like, we're not comparing apples to apples. We're comparing apples to oranges and going, well, oranges are better because they're citrus. Well, apples are better because Newton's laws and all this stuff, and George Washington owned an apple tree and stuff. It's like, yeah, but they're great on their own, and they're great together. They both have their pros and cons.
But which one should we have portraits of in our lodge room?
And
this is why we're having this discussion. I agree. Now, no, I am a little bit biased, and just hearing the things you guys have said, Googling a little bit, I do like Ben Franklin a little bit more because I feel like I somewhat connect to him a little bit more as an inventor. I don't know the guy. When he died, I was negative 205 years old. Will love to like meet him and stuff, but I feel like I would get along more with him than George Washington, where I feel like, Gabe, you and him would be freaking buddies through and through.
So, and that's probably true, and there is probably a little bit of bias on both sides here, but there's a couple of things I want to say. Firstly, and this may sound very harsh and very critical of Brother Franklin, and I don't necessarily mean it this way, especially because in the modern day, things have been sorted out a little bit.
Right.
But at the time, if it was established that, hey, you need to be careful associating with certain people, you need to be a little bit more guarded, we don't necessarily like what these people are doing, and just for, I don't mean this to sound as critical as it is, but
pitter-pattering, let's get at her.
He should have known better. If there are established rules, regulations, and modes of conducting yourself, or people that we say, hey, let's be careful about how we interact with these people, and then he goes against that, yes, for the good of the country, yes, for the good of the cause, but still kind of goes against the flow of his Freemasonry. I got to kind of consider that when weighing my options here of again, I like his apples to oranges analogy. Ben Franklin is the pinnacle of the oranges, and Washington is the pinnacle of the apples. So
it's literally just you versus me here, because I'm going to tell you this: if you go to a restaurant and the health department says the proper way to crack an egg is to do this. But the cook doesn't like to crack eggs that way. He cracks them a different way. Do you care how he cracked the egg as long as it ended up in the pan and your omelet comes out delicious? No. There are no rules here. We are not an established government. This is rebels.
I will say, though...
No. I disagree with that.
I know you do, because you are lawful good.
So, kind of going back to Gabe's point of he should have known better. But thinking about, we need a diplomat. We need an ally.
Yep.
Who are we going to... Oh, the guy that's been around the block for 70 years? Yeah, he knows how to play the system. He knows the cards. And to your point, he knows people. He can work his way, while younger George Washington can help being on the front line, pushing back the British and keeping us alive.
Okay. So let me pose a hypothetical question to you then.
Sure.
If we were starting a brand new organization,
Okay.
Podcast.
Let's say a podcast.
no. So if we are going to start, let's just say a fraternal organization. Let's just go with
Okay.
it that way.
All right. I don't know anything about that, but okay.
No, not at all. But you have someone who has some experience with maintaining organizations like that, and you also have someone who is nitty-gritty and determined to work incredibly hard and down in the dirt to do that. Do you want, which one is more better? To have literally with your own hands built the building blocks of the building to house your new organization, or the person getting some business deals to get you more blocks and bricks? If you have bricks, blocks, and people, some of it already, and then someone comes and brings you more because they've been working really hard to get you more bricks and blocks, yes, they did a great job, an amazing thing to get you more bricks and blocks and people, but you also already had bricks, blocks, and people, and you are actively breaking ground in a brand new area, in a brand new organization, and building it with those people on the ground, with those people, with those blocks.
I get where you're going with this.
I just have to say that the more important, the more vital, the more honorable mode is the person who's on the ground.
Well, but also
I mean the word.
I would argue that too, but the thing that you have to question is we're not talking about what each of them did for the revolution. We're talking about their contributions to Masonry. Masonry is not involved in the Revolutionary War officially. Masonry's never been involved in any wars officially. It is 100% neutral. It's what its members choose to do that matters. So to say that, oh, well, Washington did all this while Ben Franklin did all this, that has nothing to do with their ability to be the icons of the craft. It's what have they done for the craft, or what have they done for the betterment of society as a whole. I would argue that doesn't have, like, what so-and-so did to start a new country doesn't have to do with what they would be doing in the fraternity. Because if that was the argument, technically Ben Franklin has done 1,000,000 times more than Washington ever did for the fraternity. Other than say nice things and go to some stuff, Franklin actually worked and did stuff for the fraternity. But the problem with that is you have an opinion of what he was like outside of all of that, and it comes into your opinion of why he shouldn't be considered the icon, which I think is why that's the case.
Now,
and I think that's probably why he is not.
Now, the thing is that my counterpoint to that is that I think George Washington's holding and internalizing of our tenets and way of being is what allowed him to excel so good at what he was doing on that front. On the front of nation building, on the front of command and control, on the front of conducting yourself as a politician, as a leader of men. I think it's his internalization and his taking of the teachings outside of the lodge that cause him to be propelled to that level in my mind. And that's And like it's not a competition. Like I know
Correct.
we're having this back and forth, like it's
for fun.
Yeah,
for fun. Literally for fun.
For literally just a thought exercise.
I'm keeping score on who's getting the most hits.
Yes, of course you are. And it would be Washington because he's the military guy, obviously getting the more hits. So
Sure.
Shots fired.
Boom.
It's actually Hamilton that's winning right now somehow.
Don't even start with me. Don't even start.
Wait for it.
So anyway,
but no. So my problem is that just the way I've internalized with history and military history and political history and everything, and also I am I don't want to say I love America.
mm-hmm.
I love my country. I think what we have here is
Amazing.
So amazing and so special and so unique. And it was built and institutionalized by men like Washington. Now, I will give you, I love the Constitution. I love reading over it and looking at the little intricacies of it and pointing out things that people don't actually understand about it. And someone who did have a hand in that is Ben Franklin.
Right.
And I will give credit where credit is due, is that he had a hand in that as well. And he had a tangible impact in this country that I love so much, that I think Masonry thrives in, that I think allows good men like us to use the teachings of Masonry to go out and improve our society.
I can agree with that.
None of that would exist without what Washington did and how Washington conducted himself, because like, had anyone else been our first president, they may not have made the same decisions that he made. It might not have set the same precedent. And I think how he acted as the first president was very much him internalizing and using the teachings of the fraternity for the betterment of society, this new American society.
Well, I think you and I could argue this until we're blue in the face.
100% agree.
But ultimately, Ryan, what do you think? We both kind of laid out our points.
I have to pick my favorite host right now? Like, come on.
No, please don't.
You can pick me because I'm the smartest and prettiest.
Oh, God.
Jesus. I mean, I've kind of said my pieces. Like, we're not really comparing apples to apples.
But who would you pick if you had to pick someone to be our icon for Masonry? Which one do you think
to be the new Grand Master of Freemasons in
everywhere
America?
in America?
Like you're the new American.
God, I feel sorry for America then. Oh God,
it's hard.
It is a very hard, because I'm trying to take my biased opinion. I know what my biased opinion would be, and it would be
That's
Ben
all right.
Franklin. But knowing both sides of it, it's a crapshoot.
Right.
It's 50-50. I mean, I see kind of, and I know this isn't on the Revolutionary War, but that's one of the main topics of both of them, is George Washington was worried about the present. There we go, I can speak. Ben Franklin was worried about the future. Which would you rather have? A present or a future? You kind of need both.
I would just like to say, though, spend a weekend in a trench, or spend a weekend listening to nonstop cannon fire, or spend a weekend, or just spend a winter in Valley Forge with shoes on, and how hard it is. And
True.
then put yourself there having to go through that.
That's not Masonic at all. That is not Masonically unique.
Yes, but it may
I get where you're going with it, and don't get me wrong, I'm never going to take a shot at George Washington's valor, his or any of that, because honestly, I'm going to tell you, he's a better poster boy for Masonry. If you had to pick somebody to be the face of your organization, he probably would be it.
That's a great
word, I don't think that has anything to do with his Masonic. That has nothing to do with his Masonic tenure.
So,
and I don't want to argue this any further, because there's actually a point to this.
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter. You and I are never going to agree on this. And Craftsman, it's interesting to hear. We want to hear your thoughts on it too.
Absolutely.
But do you know why I wanted to do these two individuals?
Why?
Because it ultimately has nothing to do with what we've talked about. It's to prove a point. Craftsman, look at the people that are in your lodge. You know, we sit there and we talk about the guy who doesn't come to meetings very often, but when you call him, he's there to help you.
Mm-hmm.
That's your George Washington. Craftsman, look at your guys that are at every single meeting and they go to every district event on the planet. And they never miss a dinner. They never miss anything Masonic. That's your Ben Franklin. Would your organization survive without the two of them together? There is not one more important or better than the other. They are both two sides of the same coin. And like Ryan said, the people of the present and the future, you need both. Yeah. You need the guys who are willing to come out and help you, even if they can't be at every Masonic function. It doesn't make them bad Masons, because they could be living those Masonic values outside the lodge room. And the guys who live in the Masonic world and are the Masons all day, every day, here in the lodge room 7 days a week, that doesn't make them any better than the guys who can't be here all the time. It just different sides of the same coin. That's why I wanted to talk about these two, because they are the perfect example of Masons in a lodge. Everybody knows someone like these two.
Yeah.
And the argument is he's here more than him, so he's a better Mason. That's not true. But also in the same breath, if you're not here, you're probably not sharpening your tools nearly as much as you could be. And if you're going to go out in that world and you're going to start living Masonic values and you're going to start erecting things for society, better make sure you got some sharp tools, because you are going to come across some jagged edges that are going to try and gum up your tools. And that's my point.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
That was...
Didn't know I was going there.
I got a little bit teary-eyed there for a second. That was
like,
really good.
Oh, just fall for this trap, you idiots. Just fall. Yeah, we're going to... Ben and George? Yeah, just fall for it. Yes.
Yep.
Turns out it was entirely a ploy for my soapbox.
That's almost a lesson.
I'm going to build you a soapbox so that during meetings when you're like, if I can just get on my soapbox, I can be like, yes, you can. There you go.
But no, Sam, I have to say, that was very poignant.
Yeah.
That was, dare I say, beautiful.
Thank you. Because I've been thinking about it for forever.
And that's...
It's true, though, because we're done debating now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I 100% agree with you, for the most part. I really do. I really like Ben. I think he's a phenomenal Mason. I really would like to see him more involved. I would like to see him be brought back into Masonry as another icon that we might have, another person of like, yeah, hey, blah, blah, blah. We all know it, but like,
and let's show some. Have the one poster that every lodge has of George Washington.
Correct. Because let's be fair here, Washington wasn't exactly the most active Mason, but that doesn't mean he was a bad Mason. He just was busy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Ben, a little rough around the edges, but was active in Masonry up until the day he died, whether it was American colonial Masonry or English Freemasonry or French Freemasonry. I mean, the man was at the raising of Voltaire and obviously got Lafayette to come over. I mean, I can't wait to hear all about that, but they're both good Masons.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with either of them. They both just lived the craft a different way than each other and applied it differently in their lives. It doesn't mean that their working tools were dull for either of them.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that I really need to work on internalizing, is that not everybody has to be the same type of Mason that I am, or necessarily fit into my idea of what Freemasonry is. Now, again, there have to be standards. We've talked about this before,
yeah,
I think.
There have to be standards.
Yep. There have to be there has to be a group of like-minded men. Like-minded does not mean exactly minded. I mean,
cookie cutter.
Yeah, you're in the group chat. You know how much Brother Staylor, Brother Wagner, and I argue back and forth.
No, yeah. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we all came together for Size Master Mason degree.
Exactly.
Because we're all on the same page.
Mhm.
Maybe not all the time, but we're able to put our differences aside. I always laugh. I tell people our friend group is so diverse. I mean, if you have a fire and some beer, we'll scream at each other all night about differing opinions on stuff. But if you call me the next day and you need help with something, I will be there and I will help.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing for us. We've had such contentious debates.
Oh, yeah.
Before.
That's what makes us such good friends.
Yeah.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, every Mason is unique. And how every Mason lives Masonry is unique. Take that. Don't hold other people to your standards or expectations. But also, don't think that just because you got all 3 of your degrees that you know everything about Masonry. If you're not coming back to Lodge and you're not continuing your education and you're not being the best Mason you can be, you are letting your tools be dull. And in the words of Master Taylor, you show me a Mason that stopped learning and I will show you a man that has put down his working tools. And on that, craftsman, is where we will end this fun debate. So, thank you for joining us on the Third Degree Masonic Podcast.
And remember, craftsmen,
keep your working tools in order.
And always be on the level. Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge of Ohio, its officers, or any of its jurisdictions. They only reflect those of the hosts or guests.